Okay. I think it's 36, and yes, we can begin something. Right. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Eric Ajiman, the policy analyst with international perspective for policy and governance. I warmly welcome you all and thank you all for joining us today. As we begin today's conversation, it is important to recognize and understand that Africa's energy needs are growing. Alongside the continent's ambition for industrialization and economic transformation, this has led many countries to consider nuclear energy as part of their long-term energy mix. So, the conversation is therefore moving beyond whether nuclear energy should be considered to a more important question. Are African countries ready to deploy it safely, sustainably, and effectively? This question highlights several key issues, including regulatory and institutional capacity, technical expertise, financing, and human capital. These are some of the issues we hope to explore in today's discussion. To guide us through the conversation, we have with us Dr. Gyampo. He is a principal research scientist at the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, and he will be moderating today's session. So without taking much more of your time, I will hand over to Dr. Gyampo to begin the discussion. Dr. Gyampo, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ajiman. Yes, so I think we are all welcome to the third episode of the Africa Climate and Energy Café webinar series. And as rightly introduced, I'm Owiredu Gyampo at the Atomic Energy Commission. And then I will be moderating today's session, which is titled Nuclear Energy in Africa, Readiness, and then Opportunities and the Path Forward. I think Dr. Ajiman has touched a little bit on the concept and everything that we are going to expect. So obviously, the panel will definitely explore the strategic cases for nuclear in Africa's energy mix. They will talk about the readiness gaps, the financing pathway, technology options, which obviously they'll touch about the different types of options that we have, the SMR, and then what is needed to build a safe, well-supported ecosystem. And obviously, also some of the key highlights from this discussion will feed into policy brief for policymakers and then stakeholders, I believe. So I will humbly want to introduce my panelists. I believe all of them are here, and those who are not here will join us definitely. So I'll start with Brian Nyawinda. I hope I got the name right. Yes. So Brian is an energy policy analyst at the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, and he holds a master's degree in engineering from the Seoul National University, Seoul, Korea, and has various postgraduate policy fellowship in nuclear security, nuclear proliferation, education, and research from Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, South Korea. He also has nuclear leadership credentials from the World Nuclear University at Osaka, Japan. Nuclear energy management from the National Center for Theoretical Physics, Trieste, from where I'm speaking from, and atomic reporting from the Citizen Journalism Academy, Vienna, Austria. He has also done project management from the Strathmore Business School. He has worked with the agency for the past 11 years in the Technical Affairs and Strategy and Planning Directorate. His duties in the Technical Affairs Directorate primarily entails implementing the strategic plan for the nuclear power program in Kenya through carrying out technical studies as well as drafting policies and strategies for various nuclear infrastructure issues. So in the Strategy and Planning Directorate, his responsibilities include evaluating the status of funding and financing for nuclear infrastructure, national nuclear leadership and management implementations, integrated management system framework development, participating in the implementation of the agency's strategic plan, maintaining the agency's quality management system, conducting cost-benefit analysis for the research reactor project, and then representing the agency in the National Energy Planning Technical Committee responsible for generation planning and demand forecasting. Brian is a professional member of the International Association of Energy Economics and the World Institute of Nuclear Security, the East African Association of Radiation Protection, and the Institute of Risk Management in Kenya. I'm pretty sure with all this deep knowledge that he possesses, we agree that he will do great justice to the issues that we're going to talk about today. So, Mr. Nyawinda, please, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gyampo.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. So now our next panelist is Nana Menya Ayensu, and he is an energy infrastructure investor and technology commercialization executive with over 15 years of experience delivering new energy and digital solutions in the US, Africa, and globally. He fuses deep technical rigor and financial expertise to make innovative energy infrastructure investable and actionable. He served at the White House as Special Assistant to the President on Climate Policy, Finance and Innovation, where he led a suite of activities to accelerate the development of modern, clean, affordable, and resilient power systems in the US, Africa, and Europe. In the nuclear sector, he co-led US nuclear deployment policy efforts, including developing the US first all-of-government deployment framework and targets, championing inaugural federal agency procurements to power base, convening experts to identify strategies to reduce cost and schedule overrun risk, and working with early movers on collaborative financing models. Now, proud to that, Nana was a partner at Sidewalk Infrastructure Partners, where he built and invested in first-of-a-kind technology-enabled infrastructure platform, such as grid-edged flexible data center and shared wireless networks. He also spent 9 years at GE. This includes financing renewable and thermal power projects, modeling power markets, and developing strategies to unlock new classes of investment at GE Energy Financial Services. Also, as part of GE Global Research Edison Program, he led economic model development for energy storage technologies in order to guide GE's products management, venture investing, and business development activities. Now, leading Zorro Energy Solutions, he continued to work closely with companies, governments, and investors on energy transition finance, project development policy, and technology growth strategies. For example, he worked with the International Atomic Energy Agency on powering AI data centers with nuclear energy, and as part of the Secretariat Board of the Nuclear Energy Innovation Summit in Accra. He holds a BSc Honorables in Mechanical Engineering from Harvard University and MS in Material Science and Engineering from Stanford University, and did his A-level in Ghana International School. Nana, please, you are welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, nice. And our last panelist, His Excellency Gaspard Liyoko serves as the current chairperson of the Africa Commission on Nuclear Energy and serves as the commissioner representing the Republic of the Congo. He is a nuclear lawyer, a safeguards inspector, and a senior expert in the area of nuclear and radiation safety and security and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, arms control and negotiation, and nuclear disarmament. He has extensive expertise in the field of nuclear energy. And then he has been coordinating the National Nuclear Program on safety and security and peaceful use of nuclear applications in Congo for more than 10 years. He is the president of the National Nuclear Regulatory Cell in Congo. His Excellency, please, you are welcome if you are with us, sir.
Thank you very much, my brother, for welcoming me. It's for me a great opportunity to be with you so that we can address these key issues within the continent. And thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you to all the panelists too. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. All right, so once our panelist has been introduced, we can just go straight forward and have a discussion as we have. So I will obviously put out the first issue, or let's say a question, not a question, but then topics for us to discuss, where panelists will give us their expert views and then we'll have a discussion along that line. Okay, so the first one that I want to put across by just touching that Africa seeks to expand reliable, affordable, and low carbon electricity access. And the question is, should nuclear play a major or complementary role in Africa's future energy mix? And where does it offer a clear advantage over other low carbon energy sources? So should I start with Nana to touch on this and give us your expert view on that?
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what the other folks think too, of course. But I think nuclear's got an incredibly important role to play on the continent. And one, to your direct question of just like, what advantages does it offer, potential advantages does it offer over other low carbon energy sources? I mean, let me say, first of all, I believe that you have to have a diverse array of energy sources on the continent. Africa is blessed with many amazing resources. When you look at like the whole array, everything from certainly solar and wind, geothermal in a lot of places, and of course like oil, natural gas. All these things have got roles and hydro. Like all these things have got roles to play. And I think that nuclear can also have a significant role to play. And I think that the amount of growth and so on that's expected on the continent, it could be significant over the next couple of decades. And if you look to why that is, I think you look first to just like, well, one, I mentioned the point about diversification of just like, trying to make sure you have a broad mix. I think a big part of the diversification issue is also around energy security as well. So, and I think of energy security in a couple of dimensions. So it's not just about like having, from a resource or energy adequacy standpoint and having enough energy when you need it. Because things can happen throughout the year. You could have droughts. You could have it could be lots of rain. You could have constraints to fossil fuels. You could have a lot of things that can show up. Nuclear tends to be relatively impervious to not all, but like many of those kinds of sources of volatility. Not only does that provide like a benefit from an energy standpoint and therefore like a grid reliability standpoint, it can also help from a price stability standpoint as well. Like I think you've seen like, yeah, if there are like major geopolitical events, then like the prices of commodities and so on may spike or maybe spike like we've seen, like natural gas and oil and so on, doubling or tripling in some places, or even just like vanishing altogether in terms of like, the amount of supply. Whereas like, places that have more places that are able to draw on other kinds of resources, have tended to be able to be more stable. So I think nuclear from a price stability, which then provides benefits from an economic stability standpoint. Then, of course, from like a grid stability standpoint and security, I think it's got a major role to play, and can be work. And I very much, it doesn't have to be an either or thing. I think it should be like pursuing everything that makes sense, and then trying to figure out the right balance between them.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nana. That was quite great. So let me just talk to His Excellency. His Excellency, on still on the same issue, where do you think that there's a clear advantage over other low-carbon energy sources? Because I know other countries also have other sources like hydro, but then looking at the nuclear discussion, where do you think there's a clearer advantage over the low-carbon energy sources?
Thank you very much, my brother, for this the question. First of all, I would like to remind everybody on the Pelindaba Treaty, which is the African Nuclear Weapon Free Zone treaty, through which the African governments or African states have decided to pursue on the peaceful use of nuclear energy and not on any other war or any issues, as we can see today all around the world. So this is something to congratulate and continue confirming and affirming that Africa is a peaceful continent, looking forward for what is toward peace. On this issue of clean, reliable, affordable, and low carbon electricity or energy access, why is this beneficial? Well, I mean, for what reason we can have this issue? We know that we have wind everywhere. We have solar. I mean, the sun is there, the wind is everywhere, waters are everywhere. We agree. That's this is something important. The hydro is there every time we can face them and see them. But on the other side, we can also see the technology related to those type of energies. If really, consequently, those cover all the needs, we would have not been here talking on nuclear or standing on nuclear. It means that something is still lacking or missing. And then when we come with the nuclear energy, one thing important with the nuclear energy is that the nuclear power, of course, offers a unique benefit. We have the high capacity factor, with the nuclear, the operation can be at over 90%. It outperforms the intermittent output of solar and wind farms. So we have fuel efficiency, a tiny amount of uranium fuels planned for years. This reduces continuous supply chain logistic compared to biomass and imported transition fuels. We have the longevity. Modern reactors last 60 to 80 years. This provides multi-generational infrastructure stability that outlasts typical wind or solar farm lifespan. So as you can see that it's quite practical with nuclear energy, really practical. The benefit with this nuclear energy is the capacity in terms of operation. you know. The other issue is the longevity, as I've already spoken of, the reactors, which can go 60 to 80 years, and it goes from one generation to another. This continues actively acting, I mean, helping, assisting for our socioeconomic benefit. We hope that in this current stage where Africa is standing, the need in terms of electricity is so huge and high. Currently, even in the country where I'm standing here as I'm having the meeting with you, which is Congo, there's no electricity. We need to put power generator. But if you see countries such as Congo, we have rivers everywhere. We have the wind, we have the solar everywhere. So, of course, there is hydroelectricity and others, but unable to cover with the efficiency that nuclear energy can offer. So in introduction, in order to stay all around the question you've asked, we strongly believe that nuclear energy has its place, and that place of choice, the place which is we believe now it's not an option, but it's a solution in order to help and assist the socioeconomic benefit and development.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, it's not an option, it's a solution. I mean, something that we have to really go with. Brian, I would like you to just cap this up for me. I mean, touch on the issue, and then I mean, at least I know you put in a little bit of the economic aspect of it in going nuclear. So please, I also want to hear your voice on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, definitely Africa need nuclear, and nuclear will play a very big part in the economy, in the African economy, or different countries in Africa. So, and the need for nuclear, mostly in Africa, we project it to be used for long-term. It's for long-term purposes, as to maybe as industries come in, large industries. It is a dense base load that will be used for production of power in those industries, and also it is reliable compared to other weather-dependent technologies. So that's one of the benefit of nuclear, or why it is preferred. Also, with the reliability, it has a higher capacity factor, and also it's one technology that can run 24/7 without being affected by all those factors. Also, if you look at energy security, it provides dependable capacity that to meet a high demand that we have. And also, it is to complement the renewable energy. We are not, as we go for nuclear, or as we advocate for nuclear, we are not saying that the renewable technologies should be taken out of the grid. So it will play a complementary role. So also price predictability is with the nuclear having an economic life of let's say 60 years. With that, we can have a stable cost for all those years, and that will also translate to economic growth in a country. Thank you. Can I add something really quickly to that?
Yeah, sure. Please do.
Two additional quick points. So in terms of other additional advantages, one is just from a siting and location standpoint, and we'll get more into this, I'm sure, later. But with many resources, you are fairly constrained either on land in terms of where you can put those, and also just like on location. So like you put the solar where the solar is, you put the wind where the wind is, the hydro where the hydro is, the geothermal where the geothermal is, and many of those are more like immutable characteristics that are just endemic to that. That may or may not be convenient or synergistic with where the demand is, or where the demand growth is expected to be. So a big advantage with nuclear potentially is that, you know, you could put that much closer to populations, much closer to loads, and you can plan for where that should be in a more synergistic basis, which could be economically advantageous, and it can also save money potentially in other ways, especially around like transmission costs and whatever. And then the other piece, just from a, you know, as Brian was talking about economics as well, from a job growth standpoint. So like if you take the average large nuclear plants, particular in construction, that may have over 10,000 jobs, no, 10,000 construction jobs over that period per plant, or per reactor. And then in operation may have 600 to 1,000 jobs as well. And these jobs are, as both Ryan and Mr. Gaspard mentioned, you know, these are intergenerational jobs and high-paying jobs, and jobs that, you know, may serve communities over long periods of time. So at least in the US, for instance, you find like communities that have nuclear plants, you know, they tend to have, you know, they tend to not just have like higher average incomes, they have higher tax bases, which leads to like better schools and better hospitals and better outcomes and things like that in those areas. So in terms of like the ways, and those are only really factoring like the direct jobs, not to mention that, you know, for every direct job, let's say like on the facility, you may have 2 to 4 times that in supporting in indirect jobs supporting that. So in terms of just like this like being a major economic stimulus driver, if you do it right, then I think that then there are like really major opportunities, and it's kind of a unique characteristic of nuclear as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Okay. Yeah. Sure, Brian. Please do.
Thank you, Dr. Owiredu. So also, if you compare the land footprint that nuclear takes compared to other renewable technology producing the same capacity, nuclear tend to have a small land footprint. So that's also another advantage, because Africa is growing and we may not have all the land to put those other technologies. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just to touch on that, I remember my father told me that the Volta Lake in Ghana, which is a big hydro source, they used to cross it by foot. And now look at the land size that the lake has taken over, the timber and the water. And I mean, all the space that it has occupied, giving us just about 1,000 megawatts. And the nuclear can do same on just probably an acre or 2 acres of land. But then let me start. Nana, you talked about I also touched about the economics aspect of it, the job that it will create. I mean, but looking at the nuclear sector with the skills needed, you know, even both in construction and operation, that you need some high skilled personnel, more precision skills in terms of the construction and everything. Let me ask, I know South Africa is currently the only one running nuclear power. Egypt, I understand, is putting up one. And Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, we all at different stages of going nuclear. The question I want to ask, just from the human resource capital point of view, are we prepared? And I want you to, since you mentioned, you threw more light on the skills and then the opportunities that the economy that need to come with. Are we prepared as Africa, as a country, to deploy this nuclear power?
The short answer is yes, but with a number of caveats, and that it takes and it depends a bit on your deployment model and whatnot. So and obviously not all, without at risk of stating the obvious, like not all countries are at the same level of preparedness and so on when it comes to nuclear. In the nuclear community, you know, for instance, like, you know, the IAEA, they have a milestones-based approach by which they use to try to benchmark where folks are. Nobody's all the way at the end of the process except for South Africa. And to your point, like others are close, but it's like, you know, Ghana, for instance, you know, they don't have a a nuclear. They don't have like a nuclear power plant within the country, but they do have many decades of experience operating nuclear reactors. At Kwabenya, at the atomic junction area, and had like done so very to be clear, like, very successfully. And it's not just like, oh, they've operated, they understand the international regulatory structure, have like, strong, like, experienced regulators, you have monitoring and controls and complaints and so on. So like that degree of it is kind of massively important, just as a starting point. Then you think about the skills on different areas, and like I think one way to think about the skills is, at least certainly larger nuclear. Traditionally, I mean, the nuclear part of it of the power source is very unique as compared to other power sources, but the rest of it is just a steam power plant, right? So if you're like a highly regulated steam power plant, at the end of the day, for which there is a lot of experience on the continent. And if you look at like the inputs that go into construction into these facilities, you need like a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, a lot of rebar, and so on. There's a bunch of expertise from that. And I think that is, while they're the nuclear specific skills, maybe kind of early in their infancy, they're pathways to grow them. Even like right now, like there's a U.S. Africa Nuclear Energy Summit happening in Accra, and then there are lots of other efforts and so on that have been stood up over the past 2 years in order to get people more training, more expertise, and so on within the process. But if you look at the complementary skill sets from other industries, like you need good electricians, you need people who are experienced with concrete production, you need people who maybe good welders, and so if you look at like, we have lots of people who work in the natural gas sector and oil sector and so on, who have a lot of experience with like welding pipes, and thinking about pressure, folks from the chemical sector that know some about pressure vessels, and certainly like a lot of electricians that have worked on like other power plants and other large infrastructure projects. So I think it's a matter of just like trying to take like a lot of that expertise that already exists and try to harness it, and kind of upskill people into nuclear. So you're not building from zero into going to nuclear. You're trying to leverage a lot of what you have. And then for what the continent doesn't have and so on, you can also work, build strong partnerships with others that have deeper experience in many of those areas. And if you like build a more synergistic approach between like, leveraging what you have and then like working with external partners to fill in those gaps and so on, then you can like be on a strong and confident pathway towards deploying in a way that's in a way that is fast and safe and cost effective.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, that's really great. Brian,
Yes.
touching on, still talking about the readiness and with the skill set and from the quality management point of view. In nuclear, you can't afford to, go low on standards.
Okay.
And still, Nana has talked about how prepared we are and I explained that the things we are trying to do to catch up on the quality. From that point of view, can you throw a little light on our preparedness and what you think should be looked at to get us more prepared for this project?
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Awiro. So as Nana said, Africa, first of all, Africa, we should not treat Africa as a country. We should treat Africa as a continent with different countries. And with these countries, the countries in Africa are at different stages of the preparedness. And South Africa and Egypt, I can say they're at an advanced stage. Nana has pointed out South Africa has been operating nuclear power plant for decades. Then again, Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria are, I think they're in their phase 2 of the milestone approach, because they follow the milestone approach by the IAEA. And other countries are coming at an early stage. So the preparedness is not uniform, it's uneven. But again, what we've realized or what we've seen, a number of countries are factoring in the policies and regulations regards to nuclear in their energy strategy, in the national energy strategies. So that's one form of preparedness that they're doing as they prepare to have nuclear power program in those countries. Also, institutions, we've seen a number of countries having setting up NuPEA, setting up on operator and other institutions in the nuclear sector in that preparation. So institution-wise, there are a number of institutions, different countries are setting up as per the stages they are in. And also different countries, like for example, Egypt, in Kenya, and even in Ghana, they have the institutions that are have programs in nuclear engineering, in nuclear science and technology. So in that regard, they are preparing for the program, and when they are ready, at least we'll have a pipeline of staff who are well trained in that area. And also, in regard to financing, a number of major vendors and international partners, they are also ready to maybe support Africa or support different countries that partners with them. As you've seen, the World Bank, I think last year, they lifted a ban that was there for a long time, banning financing nuclear. So the ban was lifted. So at least we have a leeway. We can approach those financial institutions like World Bank and other institutions. And again, also in Africa, we also have industry. We have our local industries. Although they don't have nuclear grade, or we don't have nuclear grade items or product from those industries. So what we need is to emphasize on how we can upscale those industries so that they can have quality items or quality product that can be used in nuclear industry. So in essence, also the regulatory and legislative framework are being developed in different countries. Some have developed. So I can see Africa is well prepared, and the ones or other countries that are at early stages are preparing and getting ready for the nuclear power program. So if I look at Africa in totality, yes, we are ready, and we are getting ready in other aspects that we are not fully ready for as we undertake the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. His Excellency, please, can you touch on what do you call it, some of the critical gaps in terms of policy, regulations? I mean, looking at from your background with nuclear safety and security and non-proliferation. I mean, what do you think are some of the critical gaps that we need to look at as Africa to aid us with our preparation towards it?
Thank you very much, Dr. Owiredu, for the question. First of all, as mentioned by my predecessors, we have only South Africa today, which is running fully the nuclear energy activities. We have, everybody knows it, on Egypt currently, which is actively constructing its first power plant. And on the other side, we know that there are over 20 other countries, nations, which are in the preliminary planning or regulatory development stages. They are being assisted by the IEA on this issue currently. But the most critical structural bottlenecks holding back Africa energy access and the clean energy transition includes number one, the policy and regulation gaps. In this issue, we find that in the first issue of the policy and regulation gaps, we'll see the incomplete legal frameworks, missing independent nuclear regulatory bodies, which create severe safety, security, and financial vulnerability, preventing effective oversight of radioactive materials, delaying emergency responses, and eroding public and international trust necessary for peaceful atomic energy program. On this same issue, there's a lack of a standardized vendor licensing pathways aligned with the international standards, creates regulatory fragmentation, increases compliance cost, and obstructs cross-border market access. Without harmonization, vendors face redundant assessments, legal uncertainty, and friction when scaling operations across different jurisdictions. On the same issue, we know that many countries lack long-term national energy plans that include nuclear power as a reliable baseload source. This gap often leads to heavy reliance on fossil fuels or unstable grids during high demand periods. Institutional government gaps. We have on this point, on these gaps, we have the weak oversight agencies. Those agencies really lack the power and independence to enforce rules. They function as symbolic watchdogs rather than effective regulators. Without legal authority or technical freedom, these bodies cannot stop or hold powerful actors accountable. We also have on this institutional and governance gaps, we have the bureaucratic delays in
I think we've lost him.
Oh, I think we've lost His Excellency. Okay, so and it's whilst he reconnects, I think we can continue
Maybe
the
to
discussion.
add, and thank you, Dr. Awiredu. Maybe
Yeah.
just to add something before His Excellency comes back.
Okay.
Also, there's this issue of grid. Most African countries, most African countries have a smaller grid, and having a conventional, maybe nuclear power plant.
I don't know whether. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Can I continue?
Yes,
because
please.
There was a connection problem. I'm sorry. Yes. I was still speaking on the institutional and governance gaps, and I was on the point of the bureaucratic delays in interministerial coordination for nuclear security, which stems from fragmented jurisdiction across defense, environment, interior, and energy ministries. These structural silos create overlapping mandate. Protracted consensus seeking and communication gaps that impede rapid threat response and policy execution. We also have the limited public engagement frameworks, which this limited public engagement frameworks often fail to secure local trust because they rely on one-way communication, lack transparency, and exclude
I think we've lost him again. So I don't know when he comes on. Maybe his if his video can go off so that the network might give it. I don't know.
Okay, so I think Brian was touching on something before. So if Brian can continue.
Thank you, Dr. Owiredu. So I was saying also another gap is the grid size, which most African countries, their grid size is not that big. And mostly the reactor that mostly is recommended is the large reactor, which has operated and has a history of operation. So at least we can predict how it behaves. But with that, Africa is entirely not left out, because we have small modular reactors coming in, and we can integrate. We can also explore the countries that have smaller grid can also explore the route of small modular reactors, and as they improve their demand to a level where they may need maybe a larger reactor, or they can have them in modules and still offset the demand that they have. So it is a gap, but again, there's an alternative for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I think we probably will just move on while we wait for His Excellency. When he comes online, then he'll catch up with us. Yeah. So just to still touch on the high cost of nuclear projects, the financing model, the such as the PPs, I want I think Nana, I want to start on this to touch on the financing model for that given the high cost of nuclear projects. Can it be a little more affordable and backable for African countries? If Nana can start a touch on that for us.
Sure. I think that's a great question. I mean, one, just like maybe just starting from, to your point about high costs. I mean, like you look at it from a CapEx basis. At least nuclear projects tend to be very, very CapEx intensive, and they have long development cycles. So your even like kind of like average nuclear plant may be like triple or quadruple the cost of like your equivalent solar plants, or double that of like a gas plant on a purely on a CapEx basis if you're looking at it. So it's kind of like a lot of the costs and so on of the plant for the facility are front loaded. And if you look at the cost over time, if you look at some version of levelized cost or things like that and so on, then like those costs tend to get amortized out. And particularly if you're amortizing that over a much longer period of time and so on, then like there's a lot of potential benefit on that side. And I think that the high costs themselves can create significant challenges, because you may need, not every place and so on may have the balance sheet strength in order to deal with those high costs. It also means, if you're taking out debt and so on, in order to support those projects, now you're also potentially dealing with high interest rates and incurring high interest costs throughout, really throughout the construction phase and so on. It may take 5 years and so on, to construct a nuclear plant or more, depending on where you are and so on. And so, in terms of like how much time it takes to recoup that investment and so on, it can be, in the most basic sense, it can be significant. And I think the other piece is that it's not just about that the costs are high. It's also that particularly nuclear, like the risk of overruns, of cost overruns in particular, and also schedule overruns can be significant. I think like for many not just in Africa, but like around the world, like that has posed a significant challenge for investments in the past. And it's a risk that I think uh, folks need to really like address front and center. I give all that backdrop to say that all of that has impacts on what kinds of financing solutions that one may pursue and prioritize over other. Because like there's a long list of options that has existed, that exists within the nuclear sector that has worked everything from public-private partnerships, everything where it's more like where it's more the sovereign host country itself, just like planning and building and self-financing the entire project. You also have like government loans and like export credit financing, where it's like the country that's providing the reactor brings most of the financing into that. You can also go to like more of like the build own operate and transfer models and so on as well, where it's like again like host country the host country or like the host vendor basically takes on all of the construction and completion risk and basically sells you the power essentially from that plant or sells you the plant once it's completed on that basis. And you also have like a model like the Mancala model, which comes out of Finland, which is basically industrial off-takers pooling their resources together to pay for the facility and to get that to operate. And I think that, but so you have like a number of things that have existed over time. By themselves, they don't solve necessarily all of the challenges, but I think there are elements of that could be leveraged. And I think, particularly when you think about that, I think that there's that Africa and Africans and countries therein, like need to think about developing kind of like their own model for financing nuclear. And I say that from a point of opportunity, not so from a point of risk. As I guess there are some unique challenges, especially as how you want to think about foreign exchange risk and inflation risk and so on, which may be more elevated in some countries. But the propensity for African governments and African people, to bring innovative financing models even ahead of many countries around the world and so on, I think should be harnessed into building nuclear, into figuring out like what kinds of models could work. So I think if you look at like having a blend of, taking the best of our advantages, having a blend of things like concessionary finance and so on, from DFIs, having bringing like this, especially places that have strong industrial bases and strong, strong long-term industries, whether it's mining, whether it's data centers, whether it's in other like kind of like high growth industries where there's like strong balance sheets and so on as well, leveraging like the off-takers and so on to invest in the projects and co-own the projects and take on long-term and have long-term interests in the projects. I think are very I think could be very valuable. There's obviously a ton of experience of that even when you think about folks like folks like your Coca-Colas and so on in the world, and your Nestle's in the world, who today, enter into direct power purchase agreements and so on with independent power producers and others. And so I think there are a mix of models that can be blended together to kind of optimize the capital stacks and so on and the risks for African continents. And I think the other elements of that is not just about thinking about your financing at any one time. Again, these are long-term projects. Even with traditional project finance, you typically have different types of capital matched to different phases. So like the early stages of those projects, where like the projects are are risky. They tend to have certain types of capital, tends to have like folks who are seeking higher returns, perhaps more equity and so on. Then like once the plant is operating, you can bring in like super low cost of capital, folks, because like many of the major risks and so on have been retired. And I think there too, like it's not like there's no capital on the continent. There's a lot of capital on the continent. It's just like locked up in a variety of places and cannot, and oftentimes cannot be accessed or leveraged, for energy infrastructure projects and other like major commercial and other major commercial endeavors. So like having, for instance, like the social security banks and like the mutual funds, like your long-term investment funds and so on, being a part of that capital stack as well. Traditionally you would think about them as as like, maybe taking even pieces of the plan on, once it's operating, because then you're creating more flow, you're creating, some exit opportunities and so on for early investors, which therefore makes it easier for early investors to get in, and then you can you kind of treat the whole process of development like a relay race from a funding standpoint. And so I think that all of those can help. I think the one additional point that I'll make is how you think is essentially just like how you think about the math on a broader standpoint. Like what is like the scope of benefits and so on that the broader scope of benefits that may come from doing a nuclear project, and how do you quantify and internalize essentially some of those benefits? So if like you bring nuclear onto the system, and that is providing greater price stability onto the system, and that's like reducing essentially your exposure to volatility of other commodities. That is real money and so on that you would otherwise be spending. And so trying to quantify that and figuring out, well, how much of that would you confer into the nuclear? Can you confer and attribute to nuclear project and confer? Suddenly makes the economics a lot better. If you're building strategic industries within this piece, you're not just getting electrons, you're not just getting power from these facilities, but again, it's creating jobs, it's stimulating other small businesses and so on as well. Actually, not just small businesses, even large businesses as well, and you're taking advantage of and when you're taking advantage of local expertise as well, now you're also growing your economy. So like there's a GDP, like economic expansion element that goes into doing really any large infrastructure project, but certainly into a large nuclear project as well. Which I think if you're a country or like a state-backed organization, you're trying to look at them again, like kind of help to make the math work. I think you have factoring in elements like that into the balance of the calculus, and making sure that those benefits are priced appropriately. All of a sudden, like the economics can be more favorable, because you're treating the projects on a real basis in terms of the value that they deliver to their to the country, to the grid, and to folks in the community. It's all right. Dr. Weird, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, Brian. I was going to, if we can. Yes, I think His Excellency is back. I don't know if he wants to wrap up on his earlier point, or he wants us to continue talking on this.
Thank you very much. I was almost, hello, just allow me to put off the camera, because sometimes I believe it was an issue of internet. I was almost at the end of my talk when I was speaking on human capital gaps. The other issue I wanted to raise on the scarce specialized academic programs and limited vocational training facilities. Most countries lack local university curricula for nuclear engineering, forcing reliance on foreigner training or external experts to build and operate atomic infrastructure. This is a great problem. Africa faces heavy reliance on foreigner technology vendors for operational knowledge transfer. This creates gaps in local digital sovereignty, drains capital through high licensing fees, and limits homegrown capability. Development as foreign firms retain core technical mastery. This was the issue I wanted to add. So I don't know what was the last question of what my predecessors have been developing, answering.
Yes, so now we're just touching on looking at the high cost of the nuclear projects. We're looking at what are the financial models or financing models that can be adopted or
Okay.
can be looked at. Yeah, so if you can just touch on that also for us.
On that, thank you very much. So to make nuclear power affordable and bankable in Africa without high fiscal risks, I believe that country can use blended finance models. We recommend combining public funds with private capitals, sovereign guarantees, and vendor equity partnership to share upfront construction risks and lower the cost of capital. Some of the available options should include financing affordable nuclear project by blending public sovereign backing with the private capital through models like public-private partnership, the PPPs, development finance institution, the risk mitigation, vendor equity participation, and regional revenue pooling to protect national budget and consumer tariff. So on the other side, each nation must tailor these strategies to its unique economic strength. So I believe that these points will help more in terms of the costs and these issues of nuclear project. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, His Excellency. Brian, can you just touch a little bit on that for us also? I want to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you, Dr. Owiredu. So as we've seen or as we know, nuclear has a very high upfront cost. It's very costly, and putting this cost on one person can be too much. So as His Excellency and Dr. Nana said, we need to have a structure combined with different instruments, especially having a blended finance as the structure also preferable for African countries, because also this will help us in sharing the risks in financing this project. So at the initial stages, government can take charge by funding the early stages of nuclear infrastructure. That one is setting up the organization, having the institution in place, and making sure the infrastructure program is up and running. At another stage, we can have a concessional loan, maybe with the Multilateral Development Bank, as we've seen the World Bank lifting the ban on nuclear. We can have them help us in developing the infrastructure and also de-risk other part of the project. We can have vendor equity at certain point to now finance the construction and also to caution on the technology risk. And we can also have government backed PPA so that we can be certain of the revenue stream. So all this we can sum it up. We can sum it up by saying that for Africa to not feel the burden of financing, they can use a blended structure of financing, as this will not only de-risk the aspects of the project, but also will make the burden lighter on one person. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brian. So let's just hold it from you, Brian. Looking at taking the account financing capacity in of the nuclear power plant and what we just discussed. What do you think that Africa should pursue? Large reactors, the small modular reactors, or a mix of both? And then also look at what stage of grid development projected electricity demand are we looking at? So just to, touch on that for me, since. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I'll say a mix of both, but depending on different stages and different grid sizes of different countries. As we've said, Africa is not one country. There are a number of countries at different stages or phases of their nuclear power program. So let's say a country like South Africa will go for a large reactor, obviously because of their grid size. The grid size can accommodate a large reactor. And there are also other countries which have smaller grid, so they can go for maybe small modular reactors and then maybe do the modularity as their demand increases. So there's no one fit reactor for all the countries, depending on their grid sizes and what their grid can take. So it's a mix of both, depending on the grid capacity or the grid size of the country that is African country that is looking to have a nuclear power program or a power in that country. Thank you.
Sure. So Nana, looking at our projected energy demands, what do you also think? I mean, because I've read somewhere, not very sure about talking about maybe Africa can look at, or neighboring countries can look at merging grid to sustain. Maybe probably those who have excess power can easily like help the other. Nana, what do you think with this this approach, big or small? Or
It's excellent points as well. I mean, I'm definitely in the camp of both. But they're kind of situational in terms of like, how do you leverage one versus the other. So first of all, with like large reactors, you have beyond talking about the grid, so the grid size point that Brian mentioned, is just from like how that affects like the financeability of the projects and so on. So like big reactors, on a dollar per kW basis, they tend to be the most economical because like they have, great economies of scale associated with those. They are the most proven technologies. And so in one sense, they are the least risky. So at first, like, think about like, okay, well, is your grid and so on big enough to do that? Because you don't want to have, at least I'm not an electrical engineer, but what you want to have is like a single point of failure risk on your system, so that if one unit goes down, then the entire country or region goes into blackout. That's part of the guidance behind like wanting to have the IEA. Their guidance is, like your nuclear unit should be no more than 10% of demand. It's up perspective, but I think like, how do you think about, but just like it's more so making the point that like, you don't want your whole grid to be covered by one reactor, necessarily. Now, one to your point, Dr. Readiness, I mean, like you think about power sharing and the importance of power pools and so on being a major way to enable that kind of thing. So therefore, you're allowing your multiple places to benefit from essentially from like the great economies of scale that could exist. And again, in Africa, there's a lot of precedents, for that. Like Renaissance Dam, Ethiopia, serves Ethiopia, but also exports to Sudan and to Djibouti. Akosombo Dam, which you mentioned earlier, especially when it was constructed at first, was constructed. Actually, it was planned to be constructed with a lot of excess, and along with several other projects there. So exporting to Burkina Faso, to Togo, to Côte d'Ivoire as well, and several other projects around the country, in Congo and DRC and others and so on as well. So like there's a lot of precedents for resource sharing between countries. It's obviously not. It's a little bit more complicated, a little more difficult, in order to negotiate a multilateral agreement than just like doing it all yourself. And so that's got to be factored in. But that is a way to help if there's an ability to share essentially the power amongst like multiple places and so on, and that may help in some ways. On the other hand, like the large size and the associated large capital commitments associated with them can be like overwhelming. It can be really tough for an individual utility or an individual country to get behind. Just like as economical as it may be on a dollar per kilowatt basis, just may not have the balance sheet to be able to do it, or may not be willing to take the balance sheet hit and the associated hits on like on what that may imply for like, your cost of capital overall as an organization, as on a go-forward basis. This is, I would say, one of the biggest arguments for where like SMRs have really like kind of captured the imagination, and captured the fancy of a lot of folks, right? So one, you're dealing with um, you're dealing with smaller plants. And so there's a smaller cost associated, there's a smaller total cost associated with that. So even if like on a dollar per kW basis, it is more, the fact that you're dealing with like a smaller cost may just make it easier to get behind, it's much easier to finance, should I say, a couple billion dollars versus like, tens of billions of dollars and so on. So like that becomes like a much like now you start to enter into the strike zone of even like large project finance and so on traditionally. And so that can help a lot. Then if you go even smaller to micro reactors, again, you have, okay, you are dealing with potential, like most likely even higher dollar per kW, but like now you're talking on like even much smaller sizes. But that smaller size and just applies in some ways SMR too, but it opens up new kinds of use cases as well. So like if you're trying to serve either like remote applications or areas where or you're trying to increase energy access, or like serve things like mines or wells, or like communities that are more remote, or data centers that are more remote and things like that and so on as well, whereby it's not just a matter of like your dollar per kW, but you're also thinking about that those areas may be limited on transmission access, and the time to provide the transmission access, or the cost of providing the transmission access, might be prohibitive, or hard to scale. Then you kind of like can capture all of the like distributed energy resource benefits in particular, whereby you can like have and it may be highly cost competitive in a lot of those in a lot of those settings, compared to, for instance, if you're trucking in diesel into a remote part of the country, like the cost of that can skyrocket. Now the application may demand it because that's just like the only thing that it is. So in applications like that, microreactors can be extremely cost effective as well. So depending on your grid size, your ability to finance, and like and how you want to think about like the applications to serve, and also just actually I should also mention just like the rate of growth as well, because if you're building a large reactor, let's say that they're a gigawatt plus or minus in each lump. So it's like you have nothing, then all of a sudden a gigawatt shows up, right? And if your grid is large or it's very fast growing, that may be fine. But if it's smaller or slower growing and so on, you may want to break that up into smaller pieces. Instead of having a gigawatt showing up at one time, then another gigawatt showing up 5 years later. Maybe it may be more palatable and easier to digest to have, a couple hundred megawatts show up at every time, or to even tens of megawatts showing up at any given time. And then it's kind of like how some people build houses, like they buy some bricks, they buy some foundations, they build the roof and so on. They do so all in phases because it's easier to finance from a capital standpoint. You can kind of have that analogous situation within nuclear. So long way of saying, like it really depends on like the circumstances. Like the large reactors, more better, the stronger track records, they're more proven, lower dollar per kW, but much bigger capital requirements and so on. That may make that difficult unless you can figure out ways to expand the demand and serve that. Whereas it gets smaller, you kind of get the total opposite benefits. And so wherever that line crosses, if you like, for where you're on a country is where you want to be.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So, Your Excellency, just to touch on this, I mean, someone once said large is relative. So what may be large, somebody may be okay. But then looking at our resource availability for these facilities, what's your take on the options for Africa to pursue, His Excellency? Please, can you touch on that for me?
Thank you very much, Dr. Gyampo. To answer whether Africa should pursue large nuclear reactors or small modular reactors, the SMRs, or a mix of both. You should evaluate grid capacity, finance costs, and urgency of energy needs. A blended approach is best, using large reactors for major industrial hubs and SMRs for remote areas or smaller grid. Africa should pursue, we believe, a mix of both large reactors and SMRs. A hybrid approach matches the continent's diverse reality. Large reactors suit heavy industrial hubs and robust national grids, like in Egypt or South Africa, as we see today. Whereas SMRs provide scalable off-grid power for smaller grids and remote mining or industrial zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Then just to touch on the, what are the key capabilities in terms of human capital, safety, security, and waste management, which I know is one of the most well talked about issues when you talk about nuclear power. The advocates, those who are advocating not for talk about nuclear waste, the emergency preparedness, public engagement. I want to find out from the panelists, for Africa to countries to build a more enabled, safe, secure nuclear power energy program. What are the key capabilities that we should put in place? We should look at to be able to be prepared for this takeoff. So I think Nana can start with this one for me.
Okay, sure. I mean, long list of things that are important for sure. I think I would start from starting from the safety and security and emergency preparedness is kind of table stakes. One of the most important capabilities to build internally. And as we talked about earlier, countries are at different stages of experience in doing that, but it's one of the most important thing. It's in order to even really get started and really have a pathway into accessing a wide range of technologies, and this relates to, but also just in keeping perhaps most importantly, keeping citizens safe and making sure that that people in the country and in those communities can feel that you have this perhaps new technology and new energy source that is operating in a high trust environment, so that they can go about their day. They don't even worry about the fact that they never worry about the fact that it's there. It just produces power, and no one has to worry about whether it's going to be handled correctly or whether people are going to cut corners and so on during construction and stuff like that. So that's building that trust is the most important thing in order to just make sure that the project is viable, that the project is viable, that the industry can really grow. Then I think from a human human capital standpoint, I think I mentioned earlier just the importance of trying to leverage the skills and so on that are available, and that exists in all kinds of areas, in not just in should I say in nuclear physics and stuff like that, but really in welding and construction, but then also in software and digitalization, in transporting high value goods as well. If you're going to bring a nuclear reactor to a mining site in the middle of nowhere and so on, I mean, already there's there will be strong security apparatuses that are available, but I think it becomes even more important in those scenarios. You can also think about I mentioned software, but and making sure that these facilities are digitally aware, that they're highly cyber secure, is an important piece. And then from a financial institution standpoint, I think it's having more institutions that understand what the technologies are. You know, they may not have exposure. This not and by far this is not exclusively an Africa problem. You know, this is for most financial institutions around the world. You know, have not underwritten nuclear projects and certainly not done so recently. And I think even more so when you think about like your commercial banks, like your investment banks, kind of like, you know, your infrastructure banks, like kind of organizations like that are not purely development oriented. You want them to be part of the mix because they can be more dynamic. You know, they can also like, you want them to participate in many parts of the supply chain. So in terms of that, I think like building more capacity and expertise in underwriting, in understanding, and ultimately underwriting and managing the risk of these projects is massively important.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nana. Your Excellency, just a quick one on this. Looking at the safety and security point of view, please, what do you think needs to be put in place for us to be able to achieve this project?
Thank you very much, Dr. Gyampo. We hope that for safe nuclear deployment in Africa, robust human capital for skilled workforces, strict safety and security protocols, circular waste management systems, proactive emergency preparedness, resilient supply chains, and transparent public engagement are all needed. For example, regarding human capital, Africa needs to build university programs in nuclear physics, engineering, and radiation protection. That's in terms of education. Then in terms of training, partner with global vendors for practical reactor operations experience, independent national regulatory bodies with a qualified stability. On the terms of safety and security, Africa needs rules aligned with the international standards, which is the IAEA and the Berlin Treaty. There's also the need to protect facilities against sabotage, theft, and unauthorized access. Then last on the waste management, regarding this point, there is need to increase really storage capacities by creating secure interim facilities for low and intermediate level waste, build capacity for nuclear disposal by planning long-term geological repositories for high-level spent fuel. They address the policy gaps by passing clear national laws that assign financial and legal responsibility for waste to the plant operators. So this is the points that I wanted to raise.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think Brian, sorry, I nearly forgot it. Can you just put a wrap on this for me? Let's wrap it up on this particular topic for me, Brian.
Thank you, Dr. Gyampo. So I think some of the capability that maybe are most needed in, as you've said, in human capital, safety and security, waste management, emergency, supply chain, and public engagement. So for the human capital, first, we need a number of engineers, licensed operators, national radiation protection professionals, and regulatory inspectors and others. But the most important thing is as we plan and as we go nuclear, we need to prepare ourselves by having our universities or embedding such courses in our university program so that we can have a pipeline of at least professionals from our local universities. Also, we can also take advantage of IEA programs, fellowships. And again, we can also before the beginning of the project, we can have a vendor training of trainers arrangement with the vendor country. Safety, His Excellency has spoken about, so I won't repeat. Waste management clearly has been articulated. Emergency preparedness. Also, emergency preparedness, we need to have a national and cross-border emergency response plan and coordination with the neighboring states, and also public communication protocol. And lastly, the drill for such need to be regular, such that in case, because a nuclear emergency doesn't take place every now and then. So the workforce that we have should also conduct regular drills so that they are prepared for such emergencies. Don't just employ them, then we let them just sit there for the period waiting for the emergency to happen. So we need to also encourage that. And lastly, public engagement. We need to have transparent communication on safety and different aspects of the nuclear power plant with the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Public engagement is very, very important so that people understand and appreciate. Okay, somebody want to say something? Okay. All right. So I think we can touch on there's a few questions from the attendees. I want to the panelists to just address for me quickly, and then we can wrap it up. I think we are almost right behind time. The first one out, Your Excellency, I think one of the panelists wants to find out how would the AFCONE coordinate coordinate what's the most optimal technology for Africa with respect to the MSR and other technologies. So I think Your Excellency can touch on that quickly for us so that we can just wrap it up.
May you repeat the question, or maybe
Yes.
if you can, is it in the chat, or I can
Yes.
have a look?
Yes, in the chat. Say how will AFCONE coordinate what the most optimal technology is for Africa with respect to the SMRs and then other technologies?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. On this issue of coordination is really something, it's a key point. As you can see, we have a lot of countries in Africa. And there's a scenario which, quite a moment we have observed. You know, there's different countries, different vendors, different manufacturers. They're coming to propose Africa. These ones will propose this, these ones will propose this, and these ones, they come with their different technology, their different, expertise, knowledge. They will always tell you this ours is the best. No one will tell you that ours is not the best, you know. At the end, it's AFCONE, Africa, which is the one losing, is the one losing. Losing in many aspects. Therefore, we are personally within the AFCONE right now. We had the conference of third parties in which we need to bring harmonization. We're going to bring to harmonization within the continent, even on the issues of security, safety, on the issues also of the technologies and everything. Harmonization will help us so that we can address, there's a need, of course, we don't refuse there's a need, but the way to address the need also becomes part of answering the needs. If we address the needs in a very unconventional or unpractical way, this brings everything pretty down. So AFCONE is bringing the harmonization. We're working on this issue so that within the continent we can have one voice. But the end of all of these technologies and all it's a call, it's a cry, asking Africa to have its own model. By the end, we must also stand up as Africans and then come together, said we need to have our African model on these issues of technologies, nuclear technologies. I truly believe, we can see today countries like China, they were now the way they are today. So they had strategies. So let us build now strategies. We have new generation of experts and people growing up, coming up on the continent. Now we can do something. The very difficult issues on this issue of nuclear, I will tell you, that we were facing within Africa, it was political, even the political environment didn't give the importance of nuclear, you know. So it's like when they talk about nuclear, even within the heads of state platforms and everywhere, nuclear remained like weapons, you know, everything. But we thank God recently in Pretoria, I mean in Johannesburg, even the ministers of energies, they took key actions, and heads of state are taking key actions. We hope now that Africa will take a step forward so that by the end, there's no other magic to do by the end, to have a I mean, a reliable technology which can help Africa. Is like we have our own technology. It's possible, so we have to work toward it. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Then, please, another quick question for you to just briefly. Someone wants to know, how can African countries manage the risk and cost overruns and construction delay that could significantly affect competitive nuclear power? I think it's a very important question, looking at how people see us. Please, can you briefly touch on this so that we just...
Yeah, absolutely. This is a incredibly important question. I would say it's not, and again, this is not just this is not just an African thing and so on. I think like in nuclear, like on average, the overruns and so on that I've been seeing in average are on the order of like 50 to 100% in overruns on costs, and then several years and so on time. That is not, now if you look at that spectrum of opportunities, in terms of like which ones have been on time and on budget, which ones have been off budget, I think you can look at a number of things. So I think maybe divide the answer into two ways. One is extrinsically, what can you do? And that's more around like financial structuring and so on, and like sharing or even offloading the risk completely to an external party. So if you pursue a like build and operate transfer model where like the sovereign is backing the entire project, that's one way of, in theory, one way of like trying to help mitigate at least the impact of that risk to one side. And that may come with other strings and challenges and so on, which actually may be net detrimental, but like but it may help with like the cost and schedule overrun piece in some ways. Then you can think about it intrinsically. So like, what can you do in-house? And I think like one of the biggest sources of benefit there really comes through just like strong project management and delivery practices. So these are just like big construction, at the end of the day, really big construction projects, and highly regulated construction projects. What kills a lot of projects from a lot of time is just like, for instance, not starting with complete designs on these projects. There's a famous book called like how to get big things done by some folks out of Oxford University, and they have this mantra, kind of think slow, act fast, and I think that mantra is even more important in the nuclear space. So the importance of once like just doing a lot of planning upfront. One, as Mr. Gaspard said, talked about like the importance of long-term national planning and like long-term workforce planning. And then you get to the project itself, also like making sure it has a complete design, establishing a really strong governance structure, leveraging digital tools and so on, so you can quickly like identify and manage, this part is laid, this step has an issue, and being able to quickly understand how that may cascade into further delays and so on down the line is a big deal. And also, like, as Brian mentioned earlier, is like, the nuclear grade materials are much more expensive on a comparative basis than like your equivalent. So like your nuclear grade concrete might be several times more expensive than like regular concrete. And it's more so to say that like getting it right the first time is more important. So because you've had a lot of projects where a lot of their cost comes because they were rushing to get construction started, and they poured the concrete, they did a rebar, then they find that there's a mistake or there's a design change, and they have to dig up the whole thing and do it again. That is a really expensive way to live, and is mostly avoidable if you plan early and start early. And then the last thing I mentioned is just like making sure that everybody's incentives are aligned. So like one emerging model in construction finance more broadly, but we're seeing it start to emerge in nuclear is like there's this notion of like the integrated project delivery model. And what that or IPD for short, and basically what that does is instead of having, the owner or the sovereign, and then at odds with the main vendors, at odds with like the EPC contractors, you actually create a shared profit pool out of which everybody operates. And so everybody signs one big agreement. They all agree, they want the project to be completed by this time and at this cost and so on. And then they have a scale, so if your project comes in, on time, you get a target amount of profitability. If it comes in under that time or under budget, you get bonuses on top of that. And if the project goes over budget, then actually that entire profit pool shrinks for everybody. So that can create a much more direct alignment between everybody's incentives. You don't have, quite frankly, some entities, potentially even rooting for the project to be late, because then, if you're paying them based on time and materials, and a project takes more time and more materials, then they're earning more money through that project. So whereas like you want everybody to be completely aligned and on the same team as to how you get there. So there's a lot that goes into that, and it's actually something I've written about a lot in different spaces. So happy to follow up or share some resources. But basically, plan early, be diligent, and and be involved in the process. So don't just be even if your country you've never done nuclear before. Don't leave it entirely to outside parties to dictate how the project should go, and how things should be done. Like even like the UAE, as an example, they've never built a nuclear plant before, and obviously different financial circumstances and so on, but like they never built a nuclear plant before, but they were very involved in the process of building Baraka, and that helped a lot in terms of like trying to make sure that they were on target, that they could actively problem solve and make sure that their all of their vendors and all of their partners were in line. So they're very in charge of how things went, and I think there are elements of what they did that I think they're highly transferable.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think just one last question I want Brian to have the last bite of the cake. Brian, just a last question for you, just briefly. We are just a little beyond time. We are enjoying the program too much. I've forgotten about the time. Just a quick one. Brian, there's a question from one of the panelists asking, with the high adoption of the variable renewable energies and other renewables, how will the nuclear power be integrated into national energy plans? Someone wants to really have a highlight on that. So, Brian, you can just briefly touch on this for me, please.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you for the question for the person who have asked. First of all, nuclear is a baseload, and which means it operates 24/7, and most of the variable renewable energy, some of them are intermittent in nature, so they complement each other. Nuclear is not taking out renewable VREs from the grid, but complementing the VREs. So they work hand in hand. VREs and nuclear complementing it, as nuclear being a baseload, and also we have intense industry, like for example, there are talks of data centers in Africa, coming to Africa, and some countries have them, and they need power 24/7. And that's where we rely on the baseload, because some of the renewable energies are intermittent in nature. They may not be there, or they may not have or supply that capacity that is needed. But nuclear has a higher capacity factor, reliable load. So they are complementing each other. One is not taking another out of the grid. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brian. So just a quick one. I think yeah, I think Lamen gave us information about IAEA helping countries launch nuclear physics at the universities. And currently, I mean, we know there are a lot of radiation protection training in Ghana, Morocco, Nigeria, and then also, so at least in the skill set in the universities, we are all trying to build the necessary knowledge that we need for the nuclear power program. And I'm pretty sure that if other countries equally approach the IAEA, they can also help them set up some of these key programs that we necessarily need to build a human capacity to take up this nuclear power project. Okay, so I think per our schedule, we are supposed to wrap up just about now. Thank you very much, Your Excellency Gaspard, Liyoko, Mboyo, Chairman of AFCONE, Ayensu. Yes, Menya Ayensu. I have a former professor called Ayensu. So Menya Ayensu, thank you very much. And then also Brian Nyawinda. I mean, it's been a wonderful discussion. I personally, as a moderator, enjoyed myself hearing all these diverse views and then ideas from us on how looking at the readiness of Africa, the opportunities and the way forward to achieve the nuclear power, or nuclear energy program to put Africa up there. I mean, energy is obviously what we need to develop ourselves. I mean, every aspect of development is based on energy. And if we can able to put together our resources and all the wonderful ideas from the panelists put together in policy to countries or governments, I'm pretty sure that we will really see this project come to pass. So thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much for your insightful, well-experienced views and on this issue. And I'm pretty sure that the attendees also really did. I understand there are more questions.
Yes,
in the question and
Dr.
answer
Gyampo,
session. I was getting ahead of myself. Sorry.
Yes, it's unfortunate we can't take off because we are behind
okay.
time.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gyampo yourself. Thank you all to our panelists for this insightful contribution and perspective shared today. So basically, today's discussion has highlighted some key questions about Africa's nuclear energy ambition, particularly on human capital, strong institution, financing, and public engagement. It's unfortunate we need to end this here. So on behalf of the International Perspective for Policy and Governance, IPPG, I would like to thank everyone who joined us and contributed to this discussion. We hope that this conversation contributes to a deeper and more informed understanding of the opportunities and challenges surrounding the future of nuclear energy in Africa. So thank you once again, and do have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.